Christ's return. Notice what the disciples of Christ were most interested in. Have you ever looked at the news and thought, something's not right with this world? From global wars and pandemics to moral confusion, skyrocketing anxiety, and the rise of artificial intelligence, everything feels like it's accelerating. Even non-religious people are saying, these are strange times. But what if Jesus already predicted all of this in detail 2,000 years ago? In today's video, we're diving into what the Bible calls the signs of the times. Are they just natural events or signals that something much bigger is coming? Let's find out. But before we do that, if this channel inspires you and you would like to support this ministry, please prayerfully consider making a one-time PayPal donation or a monthly Patreon pledge so that we can continue to produce these videos and reach more people with the gospel. Your support helps keep this channel going. You can find links to our PayPal and Patreon account in the video description. Jesus made it clear that we need to be able to discern the times in which we live. Matthew 16 verses 2 to 3. He answered and said to them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red, and in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. The religious leaders in the days of Jesus could read the heavens, but not the prophetic signs of the Scriptures. The Old Testament was full of prophecies relating to the coming of the Messiah, and yet they totally misunderstood them. Here was Jesus standing before them, and yet they couldn't see the signs of the times, the direct fulfillment of the prophecies that pointed towards Jesus as their Messiah. The question is, could we be in danger of making the same mistake with the return of Jesus? The second coming of Jesus is a major theme in Scripture, with hundreds of references throughout the Bible. In the New Testament especially, many passages, sometimes estimated as 1 in every 25 verses, point to Christ's return. Notice what the disciples of Christ were most interested in Matthew 24 verse 3. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? The disciples correctly saw that the second coming and the end of the world, or age, is virtually the same event. They asked Jesus to tell them what signs or signals would indicate that this event would be near. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning as we get into this study. Does anyone know the exact date of Jesus' coming? You know, over the years, a number of people have predicted an exact date for the coming of Jesus. However, notice what this commentator said. Everyone who predicted the end of the world had one thing in common. They were wrong. Jesus said that no one knows the exact date except for God. Predicting dates not only results in disappointment and discouragement, but it encourages people to ridicule the Bible. So, although we can't know the exact date that Jesus returns, Jesus does tell us to pay attention.
كل يوم في جديد. دبي فون سنين كتير.
Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Although Jesus warns us against predicting dates, he does tell us, investigate the prophecies, investigate world events in order to see when his coming is near. Just as there were many prophecies regarding the first coming of Jesus, there are also clear prophecies relating to the second coming of Jesus. Jesus uses a very interesting illustration to describe the signs of his return in Matthew 24 verse 8. All these are the beginning of sorrows. After outlining a number of prophetic signs, Jesus said they were the beginning of sorrows. The word sorrow here comes from the Greek word odin, which literally means the beginning of birth pains or labor pains. Jesus used the illustration of childbirth as an example to describe the signs of his return. In fact, many Bible translations use the phrase birth pains here. Matthew 24 verse 8 in the ESV says, all these about the beginning of the birth pains. What happens with birth pains as a mother gets closer to delivering? They become more frequent and more intense. Just as birth contractions increase in frequency and intensity as the mother gets closer to the birth of her child, so it is with the signs of Christ's return. They become more frequent and more intense as we near the end of time. You know, I remember when my wife had our first child, it seemed like half a day to get ready from the time of the first contractions. Everything progressed, relatively in order. But with our second child, my wife started having contractions early in the morning, and we thought, we've still got a lot of time. We've got a lot of time before we have to get to the hospital and these sorts of things. Well, before long, the contractions started getting more intense and more frequent, very fast. And so we decided, we better get to the hospital. You'd be surprised at how slowly people drive when you're trying to get your wife to the hospital to deliver your child. We got to the hospital. I ran to the entrance. The nurse said she could see the terror in my face at the time. We got into the delivery suite, and within 3 minutes, my daughter was there in front of me. I think it's going to be a little bit like that with the return of Jesus. As these events become more frequent and more intense very quickly, before you know it, Jesus will be here. Well, Jesus gives us a lot of different signs from a number of different categories, so that as we see these things getting more intense, we know that his return is near. Matthew 24 verses 6 to 7. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. There's always been war. There's always been conflict. But nothing compares to what we've seen in the last century. The 20th century witnessed 2 world wars, World War I with around 20 million deaths, and World War II with up to 80 million, ushering in this age of industrialized warfare and mass destruction. In total, it's estimated that around 180 million people died due to war and political violence during the 20th century, making it the bloodiest century in human history. Even today, wars continue across the globe, and military spending is at an all-time high. When Jesus said, you will hear of wars and rumors of war, his words ring especially true in our time. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military expenditure reached a record of $2.7 trillion in 2024. This equates to approximately $310 million spent every hour worldwide on military activities. The surge in spending is attributed to these escalating tensions in the world, including conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, as well as increased investments by major powers like the United States and China. So rather than decreasing warfare, this century has seen it go galactic. The United States launched its Space Force, a new branch of their Air Force which extends into space. This sounds incredible and futuristic until you read that Russia and China are years ahead of the United States in developing the means to destroy or disable satellites that the US military depends on, from everything from gathering intelligence to guiding precision bombs, missiles, and drones. Well, shortly after the US announced their new Space Force, France did the same thing, saying that they would be launching weaponized satellites into orbit. This world is changing at a rapid pace. But notice Jesus didn't just say that there would be more wars, but what else did he say about wars? Rumors of wars. Never before have we had the access to information about war like we have at this moment. Every little detail, every thought, every word that a world leader speaks is dissected and disseminated in a million different directions. The wars in Ukraine and Gaza have been unique in the sense that we can see it from 1,000 different phone cameras, whether it's on TikTok or Facebook or YouTube or Reddit or wherever. It's like everyone involved is their own journalist. Everyone can speculate about every single little detail. Rumors of wars. With this being fed to us 24/7, no wonder Jesus said, "See that you are not troubled." Coupled with war is terrorism and fear. Jesus warned us that this would be the case in Luke 21, verses 25 to 26. The earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Never before have we seen such tension, distress, such fear among nations and people as we have today. A rapidly changing world and the increased threat of terrorism has resulted in people feeling unsafe. Matthew 24 also spoke about famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. These things happen so frequently now that the news cycle soon forgets them. It's like all of creation is failing under the weight of sin, like in Romans 8:22, for we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Pestilences are also signs of the end. These pests are not just plant-eating locusts or fruit flies, it includes disease. The National Geographic reports that 3,000 people die each day from a mosquito bite, mostly children in Africa. As we near the end of the world, there will be a whole range of new exotic diseases. COVID-19 has significantly exacerbated global poverty and hunger. There's a fascinating passage in the book of James describing the rise of inequality before the return of Jesus. You can read it in chapter 5, verses 1 to 8. James describes people who have heaped up treasure in the last days. We live in a time when the richest 1% of the global population now owns 45% of the world's wealth. The book of Daniel describes the signs of the end in a different way in Daniel 12, verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. I believe this applies to spiritual knowledge as well as knowledge in general. As you look at the last century, has there been an increase in knowledge? The world has changed in a way like never before. If I were to show someone from 100 years what this device could do, they would think it's witchcraft. We could talk about phones, we could talk about computing, we could talk about internet from space, we could talk about reusable rockets, and of course, AI, which has just made amazing leaps in just the last few months. It's certainly true today that people are stressed out and rushing to and fro, and knowledge has increased. What about some social signs? Matthew 24, verse 37. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Jesus said that just before he returns, the earth will be in the same moral state as it was before the flood. Well, what did that look like? Genesis 6, verse 5. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of men was great in the earth, that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. At that time, the world had become so wicked that only 8 people chose to follow God's instructions and be saved. The remainder, by their own choice, were destroyed. Then we come to this in-depth passage in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 5, that describes this great breakdown of the moral fabric of society before the end. Let's read the whole thing together in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power, and from such people turn away. Did you catch all that? Let's break it down a bit. Firstly, we are told that people would be lovers of themselves. Doesn't that describe the time that we live in? We're living in the age of the selfie, where Personal image, brand, and status often matter more than character. It's become normal to measure our worth in likes and follows and attention. While it's all well and good being connected, this verse is pointing to something deeper, a self-obsession that pushes God and others out of the picture.
بلغتك جونيور 3 الحديث.
One of the defining features of the last days, according to Paul, is an obsession with pleasure. While it used to be sports and leisure that would keep people occupied, today the pursuit of pleasure is more constant, it's more accessible than ever before. We live in a time of endless scrolling, binge watching, dopamine-driven content designed to keep us glued to our screens. Social media, gaming, streaming services, these things consume billions of hours daily. While we have these apps that are specifically designed to capture our attention, they reward our distraction. Many people now turn to their phones first thing in the morning or last thing at night, instead of a time of quiet reflection or prayer. It's notifications, it's memes, it's reels, it's entertainment that fills our mind. Our global culture is addicted to distraction, and often the deeper spiritual questions of life are drowned out by noise and novelty. We're also told that people would be disobedient to parents. These days, it's a real challenge to bring up children. Parents are losing hope. Some want to give up. If I can speak candidly for a moment, I think most of our issues are due to the fact that children aged 8 to 12 spend an average of 4 to 6 hours per day on these screens. Teenagers spend more than 7 hours a day on screens for entertainment. Adults are not much different, let's be honest. Is it any wonder that relationships are falling apart and families are falling apart when we spend more time with these than we do with each other? Jesus warned about this breakdown in love relationships in Matthew 24, verse 12. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Marriages today are falling apart at a staggering rate. People are still searching for love, but say it's too difficult to find. Spouses have become partners, and the breakdown of the family is a key sign of the last days. If I might just add a little bit extra here, the love of many will grow cold. We've seen this. No longer can people have reasonable discussions with each other without getting into arguments, or even worse, we've seen lately trying to kill each other. The love of many has grown cold. Jesus also gave us signs in the religious world. 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 to 4. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. People will ridicule the message of the second coming. Although Jesus promised us that he would return, many Christians don't even take the second coming of Christ seriously. The Bible says that this in itself is a sign of the last days. Matthew 24, verse 24, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. 4 times in Matthew 24, Jesus warns against religious deception. This miracle-working religious deception is moving quickly through religious circles, and it's a major sign of the last days. There are numerous people today claiming to be Jesus Christ. We tend to dismiss these sorts of people as fringe elements. Some of them, though, have followers in the hundreds of thousands. As we study further, we'll see that the Bible indicates that in the last days it will be false Christs and false miracles that will be used to unite the nations into a false religious system. The Bible also tells us that at the end of time there would be a movement towards spiritualism. 1 Timothy 4:1, now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. It wasn't too many years ago when movies and television were subtle regarding the supernatural, but now it's a key theme of many programs. Mediums witches, devils, communication with the dead. These are all mainstream things now. Spiritualism is widely accepted even in many Christian circles, even though the Bible expressly forbids communication with the dead. Back in our passage from 2 Timothy chapter 3, we're told that people would have a form of godliness but deny its power. Jesus said that in the last days there will be many people who will look like Christians, yet they won't experience true spirituality. There are countless one-day-a-week Christians. They profess to be Christians, but they don't experience the power of God to have a changed life. They're no different than the rest of the world. Many of the signs of Christ's return are a reflection of a sad and evil world. But there's one very good sign which is fast being fulfilled. Matthew 24 verse 14, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." Just as with before the flood, God was preparing his people, so too he's doing that today. A unique message of hope is spreading throughout the world in these last days. The full gospel message is going forward in ways that we couldn't have imagined years ago. Jesus has promised that once this message has reached everyone in the world, then the end will come. While it's good to study the signs of Jesus' return, we need to be ready always. Matthew 24 verse 44, "Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." Even if we know that Jesus is coming soon, we need to be ready as if he were coming today. Peter says that Jesus will come as a thief in the night. You know, we lock our doors and windows each night because we know a thief could come. Yet when it happens, it gives us a great shock. We cannot afford to delay our preparation for the coming of Jesus. We need to be ready.
هل لديك فكرة مشروع رائعة؟ امنح فكرتك اسم نطاق